Okay, let's continue. This part two. So, peace, Islam. Um, we're gonna look at some of these crusades. Believe it or not, these crusades got a lot to do with what happened in America, even if the battle didn't take place. Well, a lot of these crusades is like world wars, battles taking place in different continents, different places. And we're gonna read it and see what something says. Say the Battle of Alquerqueber, said to happen in mostly the North Africa and the Andalusian area, the Alquerqueber River in Andalusia, where a lot of the American products used to come through at the goal. Basically, a lot of the battle for the control of the goal. And as we saw earlier, Portugal, Morocco, and Spain been at play for the American lands. So we can see a lot of this going down in this battle in 1578, changing the landscape of America. Got the crusade of Emperor Carlos V, Charles V in Algiers, and again 1541 against the Ottoman Turks. You know, the Turks, we're dealing with them too on the side. So that means when you see this battle, they're dealing with trade and commerce. Charles V to Tunis, same thing. And you got a Velez in South America today. The battle took place in a Velez. And a lot of these battles is also at sea. The Crusades to recover Constantinople in 1453. That's when the Roman horde invaded the Americas. And you can look into the story of Count Dracul. Get into that. Mehmed II. The Crusade of John Gott. And you see Castile was a part of that, so you know that definitely dealing with early crusades against the Moors of Al-Anmar. The Great Schisms, the Great Western Schisms, as the battles that they had amongst each other before they see the dates, before they turned their attention to against the Moors. Expedition of the Almogarvars. Catalan, the War of the Sicilian Whispers, which is Whisper mean Westerner. The Almogarvars against the Anatolian Beyliks. And don't forget, Catalan had the first maps dealing with the Americas, the Catalan Portolans. The siege of Acre marked the loss of the Holy Land to the Mamluks, typically identifying the end of the traditional Crusades. 1291, and a lot of this got to do with South America and Central America. Lord Edward's Crusade. Crusade of Henry of Mecklenburg. All these got to do with ports that connected to American lands. Let's leave this one. They call it the Last Crusade, and the reason why, because that's when everything started to be Indian and discovery and stuff like that. Crusades dealing with Christians and Moors. So they deemed this one the last crusade because they stopped calling it crusade. They started calling it things we know today, dealing with America, Morocco. The crusade, that's the same thing. Basically, one of the last ones. And you know, always a holy war. The Crusade of Charles of Anjou. Dealing with ports in Europe. The Crusades of James I of Aragon. And again, dealing with Accra. Was dealing with gold. You see Aragon, we talked about Aragon already. That's how they get those powers that they later start to wield with the Pope and all that in the 1400s. They all come from these things right here. You see the Mongol ruler of the Ilkhanate. And you know the Mongol is part of American history, right? So these battles can take place wherever they're at. The Eighth Crusade, also by Louis the Ninth, France to Tunis. And you know France got a lot of territory in early America. That's how this part of it, the reason why. All these crusades shaped different kingdoms and trade rights over time. Some going, some stored. Then we're gonna talk about it. If the West African coast has never been characterized before or now by producing a single gold mine or much less silver, where did all the gold necessary to mint the new coin come from? What about the silver? So we continue in Rodríguez article. It is curious that the same process was repeated later in Castile. He asking a question. Because Portugal, first the Templars show up in historical timelines as the ones who got gold on their horses, swords, shields. And then they get persecuted. We start to see the nobles of Europe with gold. Different Portugal, France, England, all these different that we just going through those crusades, all those entities in history. So according to all this, it seems easier to think that when Pope Calixtus III ceded in 1456 to the King of Portugal at his request control over all the territory south of Cape Bojador and Nam, and a bow that was also called Itacaterra, he was not conceding territories in Africa but in America. And those territories conceded because of what we've been seeing from those early crusades that they don't want to talk about, act like it ain't got nothing to do with America. They want to jump straight to Castile and Portugal owning half the continent. They don't want to show you how, like I said earlier, these Castilians and Portuguese nobility ain't claiming things just because they draw it on the map and claim it. They claiming it based off events that happen. And the fact that ain't no America, the term America and Venezuela and these terms don't exist at that time, so you gotta find it how like this. Say from Cabo Bojador to where? Cape Nam. And Cape Nam up here. Cape Nam and Cabo Bojador. And then they had from Cabo Borjador to right there, they had San Miguel. But Castillo get from now to Cabo Borjador. You got the silver mines of Potosi, Peru. Because America has been characterized from the first moment of the conquest until today by its plentiful rivers abundant in gold and by its spectacular silver mines, it can be argued that the bows make it very clear that they are territories conquered from the infidel in Africa, quote unquote. The record books say infidels in Africa, which is Moors. And the same story that we get when they give us the story of the Moors in Spain, they call them um, Muslims from Africa. So that's what a record book's talking about. And the truth dealing with this bow, which is a document we read in the last video from the Pope to Castillo in Portugal. And they're using terms like infidels in Africa in these bows, but they're talking about America. Now, to what extent can we be sure that from antiquity at the end of the Middle Ages, the American continent has not been designated also with the name of Africa? This could be the origin of the confusion, assuming that the ancients, whether they were Phoenicians or Tortoises, or the peoples of North Africa, did not know the American continent. A big difference, however, separates this first Antikythera from that given up to the Catholic kings. That that is that in the first ecclesiastical jurisdiction was reserved for the order of Christ and not for the Catholic Church. So the first bow been given to the order of Christ, and the second one been to Castillo. That's how we know they get the Aragonese Pope in the church as the head of the church in order to get a bow for themselves. And that been a trick. That's when all the things start to switch up. That's why they call them the Catholic kings, because they had the Pope and they like a puppet Pope. So the Order of Christ is the former Knights Templar. Remember, the Knights Templar had the gold at first, so they've been dealing with America. And those old crusades that we've been going through. Now we can see how Portugal ended up with the stuff because of those crusades. That's how we know those crusades dealt with America, because Portugal ain't just wake up one morning and had these rights. So it comes from somewhere. Order as it was reconstituted in Portugal after the Templars were abolished in 1312 by the papal bull Vox in Ecclesial in Excelso, issued by Pope Clement V. The Order of Christ was founded in 1319, which was a couple years after they abolished. So they had never been abolished really, it just changed form. With the protection of the Portuguese King Denis, who refused to pursue and prosecute the former knights, you see, as had occurred in most of the sovereign states under the political influence of the Catholic Church. So you see the Catholic Church been trying to sew up all the ports and the trade routes for the gold of America for a long time. Not just from Moors, but also from these Templars. And later the Portuguese too. As we can see, they've been hiding them and getting the secrets themselves. Pope Calixtus III, when we talk about him, in 1455 affirmed that Alonso V extended his temporal jurisdiction by ceding the royal prerogative over 3 episcopal nominations in areas ruled by the order. In 1460, Alonso V granted the Knights of Christ a 5% levy on all merchandise from the new African lands. See how they write that? Slick. Using Order of Christ money, Prince Henry organized a navigation school in Sagres, preparing the way for Portuguese supremacy. For this village, the first great wave of expedition of period of discoveries were launched. After Henry the Great mastership was hailed by the royal family, Henry colonized the Azores. Remember, we talk about America and the Madeira Islands, which is Brazil, because that's the same word, Madeira. His aim has to go south beyond Cape Bojador, when we talked about that earlier, south of the Canary Islands, again, the Indies. During Prince Henry's rule, two Gothic coasters were built in the Covenant of Tomar. Henry was Duke of Viseu and also member of the Knights of the Garter. Was also the Black Prince. We saw in the last video, Everett III, also a member of that. Henry's impact on history is great, having arguably sparked the European interest in colonial exploitation that would so transform the world in the next 4 centuries. And them saying that, we still gotta go back to, if all that is true, why he only supposedly went to those parts of Africa and never turned west until after the 1492 fiasco. That because he did turn west, and they're telling us he didn't. So, being a monastic order, these territories were under the jurisdiction of their great master and not in the hands of a Christian bishop. And that's when before the Catholics in the church started to steal these, even under different Moors from all over the place, on these orders. And not, and this is the big difference in which everyone glimpsed again with change. The papacy earned income in America that it did not have and could not have. Catholic kings gain territories whose discovery is adjudicated as one who does not want the thing. So if Portugal was before Castile in America, why didn't it make its discoveries public? For my opinion, it is possible that at that time it was preferred not to make known the routes to America, so they can rather hide the secret than act like they discovered something new. And a bunch of, which what did happen, a bunch of everybody who could have sailed did and try to go to this new world. But when they've been the old world still, people ain't really been interested like that. That is, it preferred not to make public the source of its fortune. But they don't want nobody to know about the gold mines and the silver. It would also have a certain commitment to the Order of Christ, since Portuguese navigators were carried out under this flag with absolute real support, but as a private company, so to speak. On the other hand, it is possible the theory that no one in their right mind would have thought of talking about discovery of lands known for at least several centuries, which makes sense because right now we wouldn't say, let's go discover new lands across the Atlantic, because we already think we know that Africa and Europe over there, based off what we see on maps. So that's the same situation that that was an important point, because the word discovery got a different meaning at that time. Even about recognizing, and then they didn't even been doing that. They started to do that later. Once the weapon of discovery was wielded by Castillo, Portugal majorly put the cry in the sky as soon as it became aware of the facts. So they started to cry out to the church like, what's going on? Since all these treaties and all these negotiations always contain a high degree of secrecy. So you see the lines start getting moved around because they having arguments and stuff at Rome to get this line moved back and forth because Portugal complaining. Portugal and Castile. Juan II of Portugal successfully negotiated just 1 year after the papal concession to Castile a treaty known as the Treaty of Tortoises, by which Castile freely accepted to move the meridian that in the Intercaterra bow divided the conquest of both crowns in the Atlantic about 100 leagues further west so that it touches on land. So they ain't had them on no land at first. They had them going to the right of the line, which would give them all the islands in the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, and Africa. And everything to the left of the line would be Castile, which would be all the mainland and everything. So he going to the Rome and get that change and get the line further on land, so you can get some of the Americas, which been Brazil. Because in reality, they had most of the Americans, even like we said earlier. The parts of Cabo Bojador and San Miguel. They say Portugal had to have weighty elements so that the political ambition of Catholic gave way to at this point, in which, in theory, Portugal had done nothing. So basically, Portugal ain't had the Columbus story in order for them to even have that peace that the Castile at the church give them, right? So to deserve such advantageous treatment, giving it a part of the cake of the discovery. So there's supposed to be this guy Columbus finding the new continent that we call America, planting the cross, and now the church got the claim. So he's saying they shouldn't, just because Juan II of Portugal complaining why they even giving them to him. He shouldn't even be listened to because he ain't got no discovery claim. Columbus did that for Castile, not Portugal. So this so liberal session is even more suspicious if we consider that Portugal had been militarily defeated by Castile just 10 years before, which is why Portuguese complain only measuredly. So and that's the reason why they even get that little piece, because they've been defeated by Castile on the peninsula, on the Iberian Peninsula 10 years before this 1492, this bow of Treaty of Tortoises, which is before 1492. This defeat of Portugal. Treaty of Tortoises happened a little bit after 1492, because they have to figure out how to draw the maps. But basically, that make all the sense in the world. The fact that they had to give them something because history showed them that discovery ain't real. This war, which pitted Castile and Portugal against the inheriting rights of Enrique the Fourth. You see, even those wars had to deal with rights that deal with these kings who had connections with America. So they wanted the imports that he had and those connections he had. Surely encloses in its plot a struggle for control or access to these gold routes. In any case, the signing of this treaty should have appeased even momentarily the anger of the Portuguese and serve in passing to them to make them co-participants in this deception. So they started to realize that Castile doing this new thing called discovery, they just want in. Not in vain, in view was the imminent union of both kingdoms, which, although frustrated in 1500, was finally carried out in 1580 in the person of Felipe II. So he unified the Portugal and Spain. Another of the doubtful policies of the time that received new light was the theory of a late transposition, on the maps of places originally located on the American continent to their new locations on the west coast, African coast, is of course the necessarily intricate conquest of the Canary Islands. And that is intricate. We could do videos ourselves on those in the future. Guinea, the walls of Guinea and the walls of the Canaries is important in this story. Like we can see on this side, you got the islands, the old Canaries, and to the south of that, you got the mountains. Right, these mountains right there going down, and then you're going up into the Indian Ocean and the Caribbeans, the islands from here up into the islands. On this side, you got the same. You got the Canaries going into mountains. So on this side, Castile basically been calling it the same thing. They've been calling these the Canaries going into the mountains of Morocco and Marrakesh and Barbaria. So it'd be easy for them to switch the history up on everybody because they got some of the same types of lands. And let's check something out real quick. You see that right there? That means Moors of the mountain, Bracamoros. And it's called the Andes. So you got when you read about the wars in the Canary Islands, you'll see that they've been getting some allies, some enemies, having wars. All this going on for a long time, for decades. And then they started to make the expedition in Barbary to fight against the Moors of the mountains of the Atlas. On this side, they fight against the Moors of the mountain of the Andes. It's weird, but you see Guayaquil right there. Guayaquil, where they get the murky shells from, right there. And that's Castile. Portugal dealt with this side. You find the same type of similar stories on this side, dealing with these islands and these islands, the names, place names and stuff, Cape Verde, stuff like that. Castile did it right there, and going into these mountains, or these mountain moors that they call from the Atlas Mountains. And there you go, Castile in Portugal, Aragon, and Rome. So I give you a lot of these place names in these videos. I just making sure you understand what we're talking about. Venice, that's the Venetian Sea. At this time, they running a lot of this. You got all these port cities. Is what's important in history. Naples. And you got these islands right here. Palmero. We know we see all this in South America. You see all these place names. You got Tunis right there. You see Charles V against Tunis. You see we dealing with all this in this Mediterranean. And the other one, you got Genoa. That's where Columbus, basically they say from Genoese. And Marseille, definitely important port. Barcelona. You see Palma, very important. Valencia, Murcia, all these ports, Elche, all these ports Moorish Americans create and stuff just to deal with this both sides of the Atlantic. Chapter 47 tells us that all these kingdoms been our kingdoms. Faro, Uvela, you see Savo, Cadiz. That's why it's still been important to work with because they had these ports. That's why Columbus come over here and all that. Lagos, Columbus learned a lot of the stuff from. You see the Sagres, where he bought a navigation school. Definitely I need that port. And they'll tell you he took it from Moors in the Conquista. They just don't tell you who those Moors is, I'm telling you. They're Moors from Alamar, coming from beyond the sea. The Big Sea. Not from across the street. Well, from across the street too, but they don't hide this history. They hide an American one, so that's what I deal with. So for people who ask me about, well, what about the morals of this Morocco and this Fez and stuff too? Yeah, they got their history too, but that ain't my concern. They can make videos. You got Melilla, and you got Ceuta and Tangiers. Ceuta, English, the United States and English, this their favorite port to deal with. For those who have not heard of this odyssey, suffice it to know that the few inhabitants of the islands resisted not one, two, or three, but up to 5, 6, or more armed, both Castilians and Portuguese. And that's why I say too, when you look at the conquest of these low ass islands, you will see that it took longer and much more manpower and money and stress to subdue these so-called tribes that they got in the history books that they take the Spanish to subdue these tribes, right? They act like they just run over here and subdue everybody and make them speak Spanish and Portuguese, the whole continent with a few ships and a few men throughout time. But it ain't take no resistance. Why? Because they taking these wars that and putting them over here that really happened over here in this Canaries. That would much be harder to subdue. These been easy to subdue. When they were ready to push all the place names over here, they subdue them and take these later. Same stories with us. They act like the Portuguese going to war hard for these low ass islands. But over here they so weak, they've been getting beat up. Over here they use the term Moors, infidel Canarians, Moorish Canarians, stuff like that. Over here they just use Indians in the terms. But if we know that actually what happened here actually happened here, then everything starts to make sense. You'll know why Bracamoros place names and stuff right here. Because you know the history. And like we were saying in the last video, they call them the Gauchos. And they call these people the Pounches. The land of the Pounches, the land of the Gauchos. They don't even change the word out. They just change the letter. The first letter, they want us to believe they're talking about two different histories. And that's why we say, you see how Ghana, they put Ghana right there, they put Ghana right there. Every time they get in the green, they put Ghana in order for them to try to match the history. Because Portuguese played in Ghana from the islands. Instead of them playing in Ghana from the islands, which would be easier, they've reversed it. And they're playing in this Ghana from these islands. The resistance of its 7 kings became proverbial, always with slingshots and stone. These slingers had such good aim that the conquest of the archipelago extends for years and years without ever seeming to be consolidated. So that don't make sense. Like you couldn't even subdue these islands, but it make more sense that you couldn't subdue the American islands because they never really did. Always had uprisings and people burning down the settlements and different kingdoms and stuff taking over the settlements and stuff like that. But Spain ain't never had no problem subduing the real Canary Islands. They still got those islands to this day, no problem. Um, but they lose a lot of the American islands, right, to the British and to other. um, See the conquest of Tenerife and look at the dates. They want us to believe after they find a continent, they going over here and spend a lot of money and manpower. After they find a whole continent in 1492. And you see how the saying break down on the island of Hispaniola, that they got breakdown some of the saying language down in the kingdom of Dante. The two rivers, Adeji and Abona. The noble seed sell and resell their rights of conquest until it is the crown that take charge of it. So the nobles they're talking about is Moors from all over, but most of them from America. We're gonna get into a lot of those stories of the Zach Moors by name and date in these stories. I can show you how they hide these stories on Wikipedia. A lot of them don't even got English pages. You gotta go into Spanish and Portuguese Wikipedia to find some of these stories. And they'll have a lot of them be like converted Moors, but a lot of them just been Moors who've been speaking those languages and operating, like we say, on the order of Christ privately and stuff like that with their ports. But all that get put under the crown of Spain after a while. At one point, the island of Gran Canaria has up to 3 different owners. Half a dozen conquerors nourished the military annals of the islands. The first and most distinguished of them was the Norman Jean de Betancourt, and we talked about him before, who came from the charismatic port of La Rochelle. La Rochelle port is the French port, Norman port, that my family personally got bloodline airship ties to this day. But a lot of Moors that you got in these French quarters and these parishes come from this history. In North America, you got especially New Orleans. So on the expedition paid for by his cousin Mohsen Ruby, or Rabbi of Bracamonte, it was continued by his nephew Messiah, on whom all kinds of assaults have fallen, since he was the one who sold his rights to up to 3 different buyers. So a lot of these were Moorish Americans in Europe dealing with the other side, both sides, and losing their history, losing their rights, lands, kingdoms, and everything, getting caught up in the slavery, getting shit stolen from them, like the documents say. Subdue these Saracens, take their lands, rights, and stuff like that. But we don't know who they is. We find out now. And you see why they spare the Moors and Jews from out of these areas, because and then they come, and the reason why I know they've been a lot from here, because most of the licenses they get been ships that'll take them to America. They've been supposedly from North Africa and Morocco and Tunis and all these places going into Europe, but they had ships that could have gone across there. Some of them might have did going back across there after the expulsion, but the record book showing them asking Fernando for ships, which he just used the ships that he steal from the most he been at war with to resettle a lot of these people back in their homelands in America. Maciot and Bethencourt, they come out the conquest. But they even had to use the port La Rochelle. The first period of the conquest of the Canaries was carried out by the Norman nobles Juan de Bethencourt and Gallifred de la Salle. So we got a Salle in America. So he could have been one of the Mamluks out of that. Their motives were basically economic. Bethencourt possessed textile factories and dye works, and the Canaries offered a source of dye such as the Oracle legend. And in none of those Orquinas in the Canary Islands, it's in America, like we saw earlier. Caribbean seas. Off the coast in the Gulf of Mexico, you can find a lot too. Off the coast of South Carolina, Florida, you can find those shit too. And it's a picture they saying they claiming. So they come to go to war. But this way before 1492, so they try to make it think they going somewhere else. They going to Canary Islands, but they ain't putting into account that we ain't got no modern maps like this at this time period of the Bethencourt expedition that would show him that this is the Canaries, sir. He ain't looking at that as the Canaries. He's looking at some place where there's gold, orchid shells, and stuff like that. So you can go plunder. And they would have plundered the land and dip back and come back and split all the booty. Doing that for a while. Then came Fernan de Peraza, Diego de Herrera, Pedro de Vera, Alonso Fernandez de Lugo. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of these are these old Moors who've been getting captured in these wars. And they been getting put as management over a lot of the stuff. Remember now, Castile ain't had no ships. They been these people. They had the ships and stuff because they are even doing this the sailing, buying and selling. They just Castile just collecting the fifth now from them. Such a level of complexity in the conquest of the handful of islands is not understood. It is understood, on the other hand, if we assume that it is in the American conquest where the reserve of the warriors and the organizational capacity of the population to offer resistance is infinitely greater. And I already explained that. If you put the stories together of the conquest of the Canaries, it'll make more sense that this is the prelude leading up to the claiming of the continent from Castile. Instead of just believing that a guy named Columbus and 3 ships came and conquered the whole island by discovering something new. But that's the story they want us to believe, because when you gotta conquer something, you gotta put that story in proper context and deal with the people who you did conquer from and who they is exactly. In order to hide that from these African Americans today, so they wouldn't know that they are the children of kings and queens who've been conquered. Then you create a whole new story. Give a whole new group of people a name, like Indians, Native Americans, First Nations, who ain't had no kingdoms, no competence in world trade, no science, no math, no civilization. and you claiming this had to civilize them, we 500 years from in the future, we all still ignorant of this fact. And now the continent is a free for all continent because the people who once had kingdoms don't even know they did. The greatest hoax in history. And yellow is the Spanish conquest, and ochre is the Portuguese conquest, and gray is Barbaria, which is stole Moorish lands while the Portuguese and Spanish sending their expeditions. All this is Moorish lands, but that's what they've been conquering at. You see Saleh right there. You see Sierra Leone, like we see in that book. And look up stories of the gold of El Dorado. They could give you Sir Francis Drake stories and everybody, these people, and it's an American history. You see Alarache, La Marmora, the well populated. It's the Kingdom of Fez, Tremason, and Sousse. Morocco further to the right. You see, this is Guinea. Even the Moors really just been dealing with ports, going especially into this river that we call a Mixum or Shinar. This riverway put a lot of towns and city-states among the rivers. And these been the confines of Africa. But you control the whole continent as an emperor and all the kings of Guinea. Like we saw in the title of one of the emperors of Morocco, he been the emperor of Morocco with his kings of Guinea. And not only this parts, but North American parts too, been also his kings. That's what emperor is. The emperor got kings under him. He ran the empire with many kingdoms within the empire, and the kings run those kingdoms. So that's the approximates. And later the United States and Britain and all them had to deal with this too. Even if they've been in North America, they started to deal with this because the head of the empire been ran down here in Morocco. And that particular southern from Brazil, that we call Brazil today, he practically ran the world. He had the most ports, the most routes, trade routes dealing with America on both sides. Technically, we had to split up into 3 emperors and many kings under those 3 emperors. We had the North America emperor, which is Montezuma. We had the emperor of Peru, who dealt with the western coast and the southernness of Asia. They deal with trade over that side. And then we had the king of the Moors in the Orient, which is the rest of the parts, dealing with the islands all the way down South America on the eastern side of the Andes Mountains. East of the Andes. Clarified the alleged and serious blindness. We're going to stop after this one and continue in the last video, third part. Clarified the alleged and serious blindness of Portugal, with regard to its discoveries, and clarified the impossible conquest of the handful of islands that make up the current Canary Islands. It remains to be seen who were some of those harmed in the prodigy of disinformation. And a lot of people in the world. The Great Reset destroyed a lot of the world after the aforementioned Mohsen Rabi de Bracamonte had bought from the Pope the rights to conquer the Canary Islands of Fortunatas perhaps being by mandate. Remember, Fortunatus is. Let me go back. We'll deal with that. Yeah, in the Canaries. I mean, in the Indies. The first island going down the Caribbean. Perhaps by mandate of the Jewish community, as Juan Garcia Atienza indicates in his novel, The Strength of a Lineage, but the first holder of this right, the person for whom it was created in 1344, 60 years earlier, was Luis de la Cerda, great-grandson of Alfonso X, first Prince of Fortune. So he called himself Prince of Fortune based off his conquest of that island. We started to look at titles. Titles and give us a clue of the history, the true history. And those titles like that give us the clue. Got titles like Juan II when he asked the Pope to give him the title of Lord of Fez. He would try to claim the whole continent. Okay. So we come back, we get into Cape Verde, we get into some more tricks of the trade. Hope it did a little bit. The reason why I stopped and explaining probably the same things over and over, because when we do these timelines and put this literature back in right proper order, it's going to be unrebuttable. But I want things to get a simple understanding. 1 + 1 always equal 2. Always get that understanding first. And a lot of these words foreign to us. So you're going to look it up. A lot of these people like this don't even get mentioned, but Columbus do. So see you in the next one.